Good evening and welcome to a special edition of 60 Minutes. I'm Tara Brown. As acts, most crimes are relatively straightforward to understand. There are villains and there are victims. In this one, though, the roles are blurred. The intended targets of the crime have become the criminals, while the original offender is a casualty. It all happened one day 2.5 years ago when Jett McKee stormed the home of Blake Davis and Hannah Quinn. He was drugged up, armed and hell-bent on robbing the couple. But in the chaos of the attack, it was Blake Davis who got the upper hand. He killed Jett McKee with a samurai sword. Blake says he did it to save his girlfriend's life, but it's what this couple did next that makes this story truly confounding. On Friday, a court made its final judgment on this extraordinary case. These are the final steps of freedom for 31-year-old Blake Davis. He's been convicted of manslaughter, and his 26-year-old partner, Hannah Quinn, found guilty of being an accessory after the fact for killing a man
I just heard a woman scream
with a samurai sword in the middle of a suburban street.
There's a gun on the ground.
In the middle of the day.
Quick, quick, quick.
But as they prepare to hear their sentence, the couple says they're not violent criminals.
It's just like, he's gonna kill her, he's gonna kill her, he's gonna kill her. I need to save my girlfriend right now.
Rather, they're being punished for a crime they never wanted to commit.
I can't explain the terror that went through me in that second when I realised that I might be shot dead right now in the middle of the street.
They maintain all they ever tried to do was defend themselves.
I just tried to run as fast as I could. I just thought, like, yeah, she's about to die.
Forest Lodge is a quaint and quiet inner suburb of Sydney, but 2.5 years ago, it became the scene of one of Australia's most bizarre crimes. It was here that a series of terrifying events led to an attack you'd only expect to see in a movie. But this was no film set, and the outcome was devastatingly real. At the end of it, one man was dead, and a young couple, adamant they'd been forced to defend themselves, were branded as murderers.
Never at any point did I think that I was going to be labelled as a murderer for, saving my girlfriend from a threat that I thought was about to kill her.
Friday, 10th of August 2018. CCTV cameras capture Hannah Quinn on her way to buying brunch after waking late. On her return, and just before she disappears inside her boyfriend Blake Davis's house, Hannah spots a stranger acting suspiciously.
He was looking around the property, like around sort of his shoulder and around that shoulder and around the yard, and then he saw me and he sort of did a double take when he saw me. And it just like it was only a 2-second thing, but it gave me a really weird feeling.
Little did Hannah and Blake know, in the next few minutes, their lives would be irreparably changed. Unannounced and uninvited, the stranger, with his face now masked by a balaclava, comes through their door.
I jumped up and I screamed.
Did you immediately recognise him as the man who'd been looking around the property?
It just clicked. I went, oh my God, that's the person that I just saw walking through the gate, and now they're bursting through the house.
Calm down, leave her alone.
I just jumped up in shock. And within those few seconds, all I can see is black balaclava, black jumper, black gloves, and a gun just pointed straight at my head.
Give me all your fucking money!
He started demanding money and valuables from us.
Give me all your fucking money! Give me all your money!
He said, give me all your fucking money, give me all your fucking money. And I think I started screaming, get out, get out, get out. I put my arms up immediately because this guy was holding a gun right out towards us.
think I lost my mind again. I think I lost my mind a bit. I'm hiding from sirens, wise guys trying to end my life.
The man behind the balaclava was Jett McKee,
Where do you get your influences from?
Oh, just from day-to-day life, really.
a rapper who was on his way to a rap sheet for violent home invasions. His music video seemed to mirror his life. Here he's acting out the role of armed and masked intruder, a run-through for the real-life attack on Hannah and Blake. The day McKee broke into their home followed a night of feeding a long-held gambling addiction with $100 bills, one after the other. Losing on the pokies, high on ice, and along with his gun, armed with knuckle dusters, cable ties and pepper spray, McKee was on a violent mission.
Where's the money? Where is it? Where's your money?
I screamed out,
No money here.
"There's no money here," to alert the neighbours that we were being robbed. And within 2 seconds of that, the gun went from my head straight to Hannah's head. And that was the most scary and terrifying thing, to have someone have a gun to the person you're in love with and think you're about to watch them, be killed or be shot. So I've taken a step in front of Hannah and had my hands up, and I think I've said something like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa."
He's just waving this gun around, like just waving it around. He said that if we don't give him the money that he wants, that he would shoot us. He told us that there were more people that knew where we lived. Essentially, if we didn't comply, that he would hurt us or they would come after us.
Did you believe him?
Yeah.
It was a malicious threat of, I'm going to kill you, people will kill your families, we know where your family lives.
It's hard to imagine how terrifying this moment was for the young couple. But it was about to get worse.
He directed the gun back towards me, and he was kind of waving it in my face, but within a split second he brought up his other hand to the gun and it made like a metal on metal noise. My next image is just a split second waking up on the ground and I've just got blood all over my face.
What did you think had happened to you?
I thought I'd been shot.
But Blake hadn't been shot. Wearing knuckle dusters, Jett McKee had hit him, knocking Blake out with a devastating blow to his left eye.
I remember the smacking sound that it made when it hit his face. And I watched him actually fly a little bit onto the ground and his head hit the fence. And that also made another loud whack when he fell down, and he just stayed on the ground and didn't move.
When Blake came to, dazed and disoriented, Hannah and the intruder were no longer there.
The pain was horrific. It was a searing, throbbing pain where everything was just spinning in circles and I couldn't see properly. I didn't know what had happened and I could just hear Hannah screaming and I didn't know where they were. I didn't know if he'd kidnapped Hannah, if he was dragging her down the street, if he'd shot her, if he was bashing her. All I could think is I've got to say.
Forest Lodge, a suburb of Sydney, and despite being the middle of the day, a home invasion is underway. The target of the attack, Blake Davis, is now out cold, lying helplessly on the ground after being king-hit by masked assailant Jett McKee. But Blake's girlfriend Hannah is still very much in the line of fire.
I feel this yank on my shoulder and I realise that the man is trying to take my handbag back that I have on my shoulder.
So at this point, you and he are pulling, it's still on your shoulder?
Yeah, it's still on my shoulder, and it sort of comes off my shoulder and I've still got the handle, and we're outside By now, he sort of like is trying to pull the bag. I stumble through the door.
Fucking let go!
I think he was saying, just fucking let go, just fucking let go. And I think I was still screaming,
Let go!
leave me alone or get away from here.
Why didn't you just give it to him?
I ask myself that question a lot. And it's just instinct. You act completely off instinct. And for whatever reason, I fought to keep my bag.
Let go! Fucking let go!
But what Hannah did next would surprise many.
He got the bag off me, and I ran after him to get my bag back.
When Jett McKee won the struggle and took off with her handbag, Hannah gave chase.
Why would you run after someone who has terrorised you with a gun? Can you explain that?
I don't think I can explain it, but they are questions that I ask myself. I have asked myself over and over again. And I will carry with me for my entire life. It was like my mind wasn't thinking at the time, my body just moved.
At this point in time, Blake was just regaining consciousness.
I wake up to hearing Hannah screaming, and I tried to get myself up because my head was just in the most horrific pain, and everything was spinning. I couldn't see anything but red from my left eye, and blood had covered my face so much I could barely see out of my right eye as well.
By now, Hannah had caught up with the fleeing McKee, who was fueled by toxic, near-lethal levels of ice.
We were both running down the middle of the street, and I remember just catching up to him and reaching out to grab my bag back. And I sort of yanked it back, and he stopped and turned around, and as he's taking a step forward towards me, his hand comes up to punch me, and I somehow reacted so quickly and took a step backwards and off to the side and watched him fall right onto the ground in front of me. And that's when I looked down at him. He had the gun pointed up at me. And yeah, the fear, the terror that I felt, it's inexplicable.
Out of his sight, but hearing her screams, Blake is convinced Hannah is about to be shot, as he believed he had been.
It was just like, he's gonna kill her, he's gonna kill her, he's gonna kill her. Like, I need to save my girlfriend right now.
In that moment, Blake made a choice that will haunt him for life. To protect Hannah, he grabbed one of his prized samurai swords, which was on display in his lounge room. To him, it was the closest and only option to save Hannah. But the consequences for them all would be dire.
I just tried to run as fast as I could. I just thought, like, you know, she's about to die. And when I got to the street, I could kind of make out that it looked like two people in a tussle, which was the gunman and Hannah. And I just tried to run up as quick as possible to just, you know, save her and make sure she was okay.
To the terrified pair, the gun was a deadly weapon. But little did anyone know it only contained blank cartridges. So Blake, with sword in hand, believed he had to strike immediately or his girlfriend would be killed.
Blake came into my side vision and had the sword in his hand, and I saw him just sort of bring the sword down onto the man that was holding the gun at me. I just saw blood and just sort of went, what the fuck, what the hell's going on right now? What the hell's going on?
Blake can't recount his reaction in that awful moment because he doesn't have a clear recollection of striking Jett McKee.
I can't actually tell you that I have a specific memory of hitting him with the sword. I don't actually have an image or memory, and I'm I'm not sure if that was because of the concussion or because of the circumstances.
Do you remember what you saw, the aftermath of striking him with the sword?
No, I didn't see anything.
Flashbacks of the attack are all he has, but Blake is certain he had only one intention when he went to Hannah's aid.
In trying to save Hannah, did you intend to kill him?
No, not at all. And that's something I'll live with for the rest of my life, because I had no intention to even hurt him. My intention was to get Hannah away and just to make sure she was okay.
The man's just been attacked. He's bleeding all over his head.
What is the closest?
The horror was played out in full view, with one neighbour reporting it to police emergency in real time.
There's a gun on the ground.
I just remember turning around and running.
In that moment, Hannah's greatest fear was not that McKee was hurt, but that he was now after them.
Oh my God, he's trying to stand up. Quick, quick, quick.
And I remember looking back behind me and I saw him getting up, and I turned to Blake and I said, "Run."
How gorgeous the lotuses are.
Blake Davis and Hannah Quinn are a young couple who have been in love for the past 4 years, excited about spending their lives together.
It feels like a different lifetime, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely does.
But what they dreamed of, a regular, easy life, is now an impossibility. After Jett McKee broke into their home,
Where's the money? Where is it? Where's your money?
viciously attacked Blake, and threatened both their lives while trying to rob them. The consequences of that attack
A scene greeted with shock and horror.
will be with them forever.
It's like living in a nightmare every day. You wake up thinking, this can't be true, this hasn't happened, this hasn't turned everything upside down, and, you know.
And now our lives are just full of angst and heartbreak and sadness and trauma, you know. It's just every day is reliving the trauma that we've been through.
Insisting he had to defend Hannah, Blake hit Jett McKee with his samurai sword, knocking him to the ground. But to their minds, that did not end the threat.
I remember Hannah saying run, because it seemed like he was coming after us. At that point, it was panic. It was let's get as far away from this person as possible.
Witnesses have told police that they saw the man stagger down the street, bleeding badly from the head.
While Jett McKee did manage to get up, the blow from the samurai sword would prove to be fatal. And within the hour, Blake and Hannah were police targets, wanted for murder.
With Paul Air on the hunt for a killer or killers.
In that moment, when you have decided you have to run, did you think you'd done something wrong?
At this point, I don't think it even crossed my mind. At this point, I think it was just get out of here before this person shoots us.
Did you think at any point that you need to call an ambulance? Did you think he does need help? I've got to do something here?
I did wonder, you know, does this person need medical attention? But at the same time, I had absolutely no idea that the injuries were so serious. You know, he got back up. You know, I turned around and I saw him getting back up and went, shit, he's going to come after us. And that scared me more than anything.
But it's what the couple did next that would raise the suspicions of authorities.
Hiding in the shadows.
They raced home, hid the sword in the backyard, and then, concussed, Blake packed a bizarre grab bag of nunchucks, a toy pellet gun, and $21,000 in savings. Blake says to this day he is perplexed by what they took with them.
It was my prop bag because I'd been doing acting for many years.
What made you decide to take those things, those items?
It just showed you how much my head was not in a good place to have 5 nunchucks in a bag and to be, you know, leaving with this. It just kind of showed, I guess, how irrational and how much we weren't, you know, okay at that point. We were just going off fear and impulse, but I don't know even why those things were taken.
I'm pretty sure I said to Blake, grab the money, because I thought that someone would be coming back to get the money.
With their one bag packed, they escaped the house and hid in a nearby laneway.
It's like this shockwave comes through me again, and I'm like, we've got to keep going, we've got to keep moving and get away from this guy who's coming after us.
For the next 3 days, convinced Jett McKee and his accomplices were after them, they didn't stop moving. From hotel to hotel, with almost every step tracked by CCTV.
We didn't want to actually go and stay with family or friends out of fear that if someone found us, then we were putting our loved ones in danger. And that's kind of why we jumped from hotel to hotel, because we could
start to question everything. You start to look over your shoulders at, you know, every single person and see that there's a potential danger or threat anywhere.
Does that include the police? I mean, police are there to protect you, so if you're that fearful, why not call them in to help you?
I don't think there was even a thought of the police at that first initial time when that had happened, just because we were running off fear.
We've seen you in a cab, we've seen you in lifts, we've seen you in hotels checking in.
2.5 years later, watching it all unfold on CCTV footage, Blake and Hannah are adamant it was fear, not guilt, that made them flee that fateful Friday.
Were you actually on the run from police?
Not at all. Not at all.
It's always been put on us where, you know, you'd fled for those 3 days, but I think if we were really fleeing, then, you know, you would have done everything possible to get away from it and make yourself disappear, which we didn't do.
But the man they were fleeing from, Jett McKee, was no longer a threat, having died at the scene. Blake and Hannah claim they only learned of his death the following day from a taxi radio.
The news report said that someone had died, and that's when we both just looked at each other and started crying, and I think realised the gravity of the situation that we'd found ourselves in, but we didn't realise how serious it was until the Saturday, and we realised that, of course, like we definitely are going to need to talk to the police about what had happened and what had occurred.
So why didn't you?
Still just not thinking straight at all, and completely, I think, bewildered and a bit dumbfounded by the whole situation. But on Sunday morning, the first thing that we did was make contact with the police.
They finally met with police on Monday evening, 3 days after the attack, giving themselves the chance first to see a lawyer. But coming to terms with having killed another was still beyond Blake.
Did any part of you ever imagine you could be capable of such a thing?
No, I never wanted to hurt anyone, let alone take a life away. It's just, it doesn't feel real. I have not known how to come to terms with something like that.
And you understand that the reason that you're under arrest is in relation to a murder investigation?
On meeting with police, the action was instant. Instead of accepting they'd been acting in self-defence, police arrested and then immediately charged both Blake and Hannah with murder.
How did you expect the authorities to respond?
I don't think it was something I comprehended at that point in time. We were never told, even by the lawyers, that we were going, you know, to be charged with something as serious as murder.
Did you at any time make a plan or have any premeditations with yourself and Blake in regards to murdering Jett McKee? No?
And for you, Hannah?
I could not comprehend or understand why that had happened.
But after a police search of their home, not all was as it seemed.
Numerous small containers containing cannabis.
And this was not a random attack.
I did meet this person at my property once. I believe that's when he would have seen there was a drawer full of money. So my initial reaction waking up was I've been shot, my eye's gone.
The photo of the injury to Blake Davis's left eye is certainly not pretty. Damage done when he was punched by home invader Jett McKee, who was armed with knuckle dusters. The vicious blow knocked Blake out cold.
My orbital displacement was 4 mils pushed in towards the nose, and then there was 3 fractures surrounding it as well, which had spread apart. It wasn't just bleeding from the eye, there was blood going from inside the eye socket and coming out of my nose and mouth as well.
It's the middle of the day and a body lies in the middle of the road.
It was a shocking and violent attack on Blake that eventually led to McKee's death.
The 30-year-old man had just been struck in the head with a samurai sword.
But as it turns out, while McKee was a stranger to Blake and partner Hannah, the attack on them was not random. McKee had been driven to Blake's house by a friend who knew the pair kept cash at home. This friend had sold cannabis to Hannah, who was on selling it to her friends, making her easy prey for Jett McKee. Why did this man target you?
I had met up with someone that the man was friends with, and I'd bought cannabis off him a couple of times. I never would have considered myself a drug dealer or someone, who dealt cannabis. At that point in time, I'd been a heavy cannabis user and a smoker for a number of years. And I sort of started buying larger quantities of cannabis and sort of splitting it up with friends and things like that. So, I guess this friend of the man who entered our home thought that we must have heaps of money or something, and that's why we were targeted.
That friend, who is now serving time in an overseas jail and can't be identified for legal reasons, was meant to be Jett McKee's getaway driver. He and McKee had pulled off a similar home invasion just weeks earlier, where he attacked the victim with a crowbar. This time around, he and McKee staked out Hannah and Blake's house for 2 days before the attempted robbery.
I did meet this person who was the getaway driver at my property once, and when Hannah had purchased some cannabis, I believe that's when he would have seen there was a drawer full of money.
How much money was in the drawer?
I believe there was $3,000.
Yeah.
Police found the $3,000 in cash and a small quantity of marijuana when they searched Blake's home. But it was the discovery of another $20,000 the couple had taken when fleeing that really raised eyebrows. The money was found in an abandoned bag in the laneway Hannah and Blake had hidden in. The $20,000 that was found, was that money from drugs?
No. When I first met Hannah, she had a tin of savings, and after months of us dating, we decided we wanted to go on holiday together, and I said, I'll match what you have and let's go on a holiday together.
Why did you leave the bag with all that money in it behind?
I'm not really sure.
You've really forgotten all your savings?
Yeah, and I mean, it seems crazy.
It's not a situation where you didn't want to be found with that much money on you?
Well, no, because then we wouldn't have taken it with us, you know. There's no rationale to to what happened or why that was left behind.
So running, not calling the police, was any of that because of your involvement with cannabis?
Not at all.
No, not at all.
Definitely not. I think if that was any thought on our minds, we would have made sure we'd, taken the cannabis that was in the Forest Lodge home with us. I think, marijuana had nothing to do with our thought process whatsoever at that point in time. It was just an impulse of, let's get away from here.
The way the Crown ran its case, you would have, thought perhaps it was a drug trial, not a murder trial.
It was a tactic that seemed to work on the jury at Hannah and Blake's criminal trial, according to Hannah's defence lawyer, Lauren McDougall.
It felt like the Crown were running a case that it was a turf war. So I thought that it may have had an impact on the jury's deliberations, certainly.
Do you think that, knowing what Blake and Hannah say about their drug use, that in any way can justify the type of attack that they suffered?
No, absolutely not.
For Blake and Hannah's side, it was always a very obvious case of self-defence against an unwanted attack in their home.
We woke up that day wanting to have a beautiful, nice day together. We didn't wake up that day wanting to disrupt someone's life or hurt someone or do anything malicious.
But it was argued in court when Jett McKee grabbed Hannah's bag and made a run for it, Blake and Hannah no longer needed to defend themselves, that by giving chase, they became the assailants.
Was he running away at the time that you attacked him?
Well, no, not at all. My first visual that I was able to kind of make out was a gunman and my girlfriend in a physical fight on the street. And I believe if someone has a gun to you and you're not able to defend yourself, then when can you defend yourself? Especially if someone's come into your house where, that's your safe space.
But this is now on the street. This is no longer in your home.
Yeah, so I think what that does is it makes you feel like having someone point a gun at your partner to the point you think they're about to be killed. If you can't save them, then what can you do, really?
It's a question most of us ask ourselves. What would and could we do if faced with such a threat? According to Lauren, self-defence is a complicated legal argument.
Essentially, the main thing to understand with self-defence is that the reaction of someone has to be proportionate with the threat or the perceived threat. And for Blake, the threat had never dissipated. He was constantly of the view that Hannah was in danger as the deceased and Hannah went out onto the road. In his mind, she was still in danger.
Why do you think the jury didn't accept that?
I think the jury were troubled by various aspects of the case. The use of the sword, I think, probably troubled them. I always think if you didn't get a sword, what if you got something else? Would that have been a different outcome? It's an exotic object that he happened to have lying around. Some of the jury might not have understood or accepted that Hannah went after the deceased. She left the house and followed him to get her bag back. And then probably also the fact that they didn't go to the police sooner. I think that didn't sit well with the jury, perhaps. I'm just not sure. I wish I knew.
Ultimately, the jury judged Hannah guilty of being an accessory to manslaughter after the fact. Blake got off his murder charge, but was found guilty of manslaughter for using excessive force when he tried to defend Hannah.
To have a verdict come back to say the self-defence was excessive, resulting in a manslaughter charge, was still just unbelievable.
When you reflect, though, on those events, do you agree that anything you did was excessive?
I believe if that hadn't happened, then Hannah could have been the one who had died. It's hard because I've never comprehended anything besides this being self-defence, and to be told that it was excessive, it just makes you question, well, how do you save someone you love then? What do you do? And more than anything, I wish that he wasn't dead, and I wish that he was still alive. and I will live with that for the rest of my life.
But central to this case was Hannah's life ever really under threat.
This was clearly self-defence. Things were definitely misconstrued in the courtroom.
Maybe they just didn't believe you.
The jury in the trial of Blake Davis and Hannah Quinn has made its judgment. It's found the force Blake used to defend his girlfriend Hannah against home invader Jett McKee was excessive. With McKee's death, Blake was found guilty of manslaughter and Hannah guilty of being an accessory to manslaughter after the fact. 4 months later, on March 18, it's sentencing day before Justice Natalie Adams.
I'm left with no doubt that the lives of both the McKee family and the Davis family have been shattered forever as a result of the events that occurred in Hereford Street, Forest Lodge on the 10th of August 2018.
Justice Adams conceded McKee's attempted armed robbery in Blake's Forest Lodge home would have been terrifying to anyone.
In assessing the objective seriousness of this offence of manslaughter, it is pertinent to have regard to the fact that Mr Davis killed Mr McKee in response to a horrific home invasion.
For Blake Davis, who already suffered from anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, the attack sparked an even more acute response.
He was concussed. He's in a situation where he's very worried about his partner. They're in survival mode in many ways, and so he's acting in an impulsive way without really thinking through the consequences of what he's doing.
In the days just after the attack, psychologist Tim Watson-Munro was asked to help counsel a distraught Hannah. He, unlike many others, understands her confounding decision to chase the attacker down the street after he stole her handbag.
She's confronted with somebody with a firearm and knuckle dusters, and she's terrified.
So if you're terrified, do you race after somebody who's just terrorised you with a gun?
This is one of the issues, I think, that perplexes people, but to me that's totally understandable. And it's the so-called fight or flight response. So people who are confronted with potentially life-threatening situations, behaviour overrides judgment.
So she was fighting?
Yes.
In that moment?
Yeah.
According to Tim, it was Blake's anxiety and PTSD and Hannah's pre-existing attention deficit hyperactivity disorder that helped shape what they did next. On striking McKee, instead of calling police, they impulsively went on the run for 3 days.
The decision-making that happens immediately after Jett McKee is struck, they run. They run and everything seems completely and utterly chaotic.
I think in the context of what we've described, somebody having ADHD, somebody being concussed, both people being very fearful, adrenaline coursing through their veins, this type of confusional state is not uncommon.
And so do you believe her when she says that? And Blake says the same thing, that they weren't on the run from police, they were running for their lives.
At that particular moment, I do believe her, yes.
In their final days together, as they awaited sentencing, Blake and Hannah hoped others would understand the threat they felt when they came face to face with Jett McKee in 2018. He burst into their home, threatening them with a gun. He used knuckle dusters to knock out Blake, fracturing his eye socket. When Blake came to, his face covered in blood, the pain was so great he thought he'd been shot. And he says he believed McKee was about to use the gun on Hannah.
I just thought, she's about to die, and he's going to shoot her too.
Do you remember seeing him holding a gun?
On the street, when I got up to them, I have a pretty big blank, but I knew in my heart of hearts the threat was still there. I knew that the gunman and the gun were indivisible.
But contentiously, onlookers on the day tell a different story. How do you explain the fact that witnesses say they didn't see a gun?
They did end up seeing a gun on the ground, but they were 85 metres away. And most people didn't see that I had a sword. People described it as a stick, or people described it as a pole. If you can't make out that someone is holding a sword, you're not going to be able to make out that someone's holding a gun.
Much closer to the action, and claiming to have a clear memory of what happened, Hannah says McKee was pointing the gun at her at the time Blake hit him with the sword.
Hannah, is there any chance that he didn't have a gun?
Any chance he didn't have a gun? No. Sorry, I was a bit taken aback by that question.
Well, you're the closest witness, aren't you? So
yeah.
What is your response to, people doubting that he in fact had a gun pointed at you in that moment?
It hurts, I suppose, because indirectly I'm sort of being told that, like, I could be fabricating that or something. But that gun was very real. How else can you explain it being on the ground if he wasn't holding it?
None of the eyewitnesses described seeing a gun in the hands of the deceased when he was running, or a gun being produced by the deceased at any time prior to him being struck.
It would be the most critical and damning piece of the case for the jury. And as Justice Adams revealed during her sentencing remarks, ultimately the jury did not believe Hannah.
I am satisfied that Mr. McKee pointed the pistol at them inside the premises, had it somewhere in his body while he ran, and dropped it near the car, either at or after the fatal blow. Consistent with the jury verdict, I'm not satisfied that Mr. McKee was pointing a gun at Miss Quinn at the time of the fatal blow. Would you please stand, Mr. Davis?
Justice Adams sentenced Blake to a non-parole period of 2 years and 9 months in jail.
Having regard to all of the evidence, but in particular the evidence of the eyewitnesses and the injury itself, I am satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that Mr. Davis intended to kill Mr. McKee at the relevant time.
Blake immediately applied for bail to appeal the judgment, but was refused, leaving a distressed Hannah to head home without him.
It's too hard to hold together, huh, Hannah? Take a moment.
While a jail term for Blake was always expected, the reality of it is too much for an overwrought Hannah.
What did you think was going to happen?
It's naively, I thought he'd be sitting there next to me right now.
You thought Blake would be there next to you?
Perhaps even harder still was to hear that the court did not accept that Jett McKee posed a risk to Hannah at the time he was killed by Blake.
I know it's incredibly difficult, but one of the things that was raised by the judge was that she didn't believe that a gun was pointed at you when she was making her sentencing remarks. She didn't believe that. What was your reaction to that?
It felt like a dagger in my heart. There was nothing like being told that you're not believed about the single most traumatic event of your life. And to share that and to say that you're not believed.
Last Friday, it was Hannah's turn to be sentenced. She avoided jail but was given a 2-year community corrections order, without Blake until his release in 2023. While the legal judgment is that Blake's response to the attack by Jett McKee was unreasonable, Hannah remains convinced Blake never had a choice.
Hannah, are you happy with that decision?
No comments at this moment.
How do you view what he did that day?
I will forever be grateful to him for saving my life. I will forever be heartbroken and tortured that somebody lost their life that day. But I count my blessings that I'm still here.
We asked Jett McKee's family for comment, but they declined. Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes, segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.